John Wertz here, Montgomery County Tea Party. We are here with Dr. Snyder, and she is the incumbent on the Woodlands Township, position 6, and she's running for re-election there. With me is Larry Rogers, James Byers, Dennis Tibbs, and Pat Tibbs. So as we discussed, Ann, if you would like, you can kick this thing off with up to 5-minute opening, and then we'll go around the table with Q&A after that.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you for coming in.
Well, thank you for having me. First, wanted to thank you for your flexibility. I know I was to come several weeks ago, but the Township Board had additional meetings regarding our proposed tax rate, and felt that it was more important to be at the board meeting, and so I appreciate having this opportunity to come this evening.
No problem.
Thank you. I guess where I will start is, I have lived in Montgomery County, always in the Woodlands for the past 30 years. And my husband and I, who have been married 47 years, have raised our children here, and now 6 grandchildren, and it is our home. It's where we plan to live and retire in the Woodlands. I've been involved in many capacities in the Woodlands since we moved here. I grew up in a family, a very conservative family that felt that being a part of the community was important. My father was on the school board. He was a general surgeon on the Board of Regents and a number of other things. My mother was also very active in a multitude. So that was part of my upbringing, that we were expected to give back. Since living here, I have been involved in many nonprofits as well as many I want to say endeavors to make our community better than what it is, and feel that we've enhanced and have done some good things. While on the Township Board, feel one of the things I'm most proud of, and it's just most recent, is to stand and support the effective tax rate. I felt that was important to the people of our township, and very excited and pleased that then the entire board, all 7, unanimously, when at our last meeting, voted in favor of the effective tax rate. Some have asked why or what that did to our budget. It's still, for 2020, we have a balanced budget. And it is something that we'll need to look at in the future, but I think it's important to represent the people, and the people wanted lower taxes. Another that I feel very proud of is I've always been independent. I grew up in a culture and that regardless who the audience is, that you're honest. And we may not agree on some things, but you will know where I stand, and I think that's important. I think it's important to be consistent, to be fair, and feel that I have done that during my 4 years on the Woodlands Township Board. The other is very supportive. My very primary reason for seeking re-election is safety and law enforcement. That's always been #1 since I ran 4 years ago, so have not deterred or gone a different way. Another reason for seeking re-election is, as you all know, incorporation is a major item on our agenda in the next several years, and felt that continuity was important. The third is, in addition to incorporation and safety and law enforcement, is our leadership. Mr. Norrell is retiring in April 2020. And with leadership changes, again, felt that it was important that we had continuity on the board. And those are predominantly why I'm running. This summer, my husband and I decided that we would do this one more time. And here I am.
Term limiting yourself, huh?
One more time.
Okay. So you just mentioned something in your opening that said, okay, obviously y'all voted for the effective tax rate. And you said that residents want lower taxes. Does that mean, so holding that effective tax rate, is that gonna mean lower taxes for people in the Woodlands?
Well, it is. Our property tax, the effective tax rate is 0.2240. Our current tax rate is 0.2273, and the proposed was 0.23.
So what if appraisals go up? What happens to taxes? Don't we have to write a bigger check?
Well,
Those under 65?
under 65, thank you, John. But if it's still, with the fact that it's lower, it's less than what it would have been if we would have adopted the proposed tax rate.
But it still could be.
It still could be.
Still be higher taxes.
That's right.
If you're like,
That's
less
right.
than 65
Yes.
or not disabled or, okay. And you said Don's, Norrell's retirement's April 2020.
But he has agreed, the board has added that he will stay on as a consultant for 1 year,
Okay.
if we need him. Which during the transition, depending on what happens next year, the timeline that was given on last night, Wednesday, was that we would look at, the board would look at calling, if we are going to have an election about incorporation, we would, it's on the calendar to look at that in May and 2020, and decide if it'll be on the November ballot.
Next year, okay.
Yes.
Where are we? How far along are we in that study? When will we have enough information, or is there enough information now to project whether this should be on the ballot and if this is a good idea or a bad idea?
Well, as you may know, is that we have hired consultants. We have already spent over $1 million on our consultants. If we go through with everything that is planned, it'll be $1.2 million that we will have spent on our consultants. With that said, during public session, I don't know what has been said privately, but board members, including myself, have said that if the board has elected to go through an incorporation study, we should not take a position being it for or against. We should wait and see what the study reveals when it's completed. Right now, we're looking at the timeline that was presented, was that law enforcement will be discussed at the October 17th and October 24th incorporation planning study. They'll bring forth 3 different models, be it a full police force of our own, hybrid, and or the third model is that it would be contractual. Numbers will be given, and then the cost of each, then it will be, it's scheduled to be, make a decision on which one of those 3 at the October 24th meeting. November's the election. I think we have one meeting in November, November 20th, for whatever candidates are elected. And then in December, the timeline is to look at and decide what the tax rate will be if and when we do incorporate. We've been very firm that it is important to share the actual cost of incorporation. We still will pay county taxes, but also will have, if there's an increase, and it appears there will be an increase of some type, if and when we do incorporate. There's also additional fees, such as franchise fees, which are not, if you're an Entergy customer, Entergy does not charge a franchise fee. But as a city, we are obligated, not obligated, we are required to charge franchise fees. And so we've said publicly during board meetings that we want to be sure that the residents know that the tax rate will be no more than this by year 5, and franchise fees, and if there's any other additional costs that will be affected by the residents. With that said, there are some revenue generators that we'll receive that we currently do not, such as alcohol tax. Well, goes, we do not receive that right now, so that will be another source. Could also be court.
Any idea how much that is?
Oh, yes, and I should know that off the top of my head, but it, I want to say it was 900, and it was sizable. It was sizable. It was
Around
6
$1 million?
digit, yeah, it was close to $1 million, John. And should have that, we received that last night.
Okay. Larry?
Explain the, I've heard that the Woodlands Township owns some fire trucks. Explain that whole thing and how that would be affected if you incorporate.
Well, it would, they would still, the fire department is part of the township. They are township employees. The facilities are township. The equipment is township. So I don't see that there would be major changes. That's something, I'll be very honest, that we have not discussed in length. We have always made our fire department a priority. It's important, be it response time, be it their ISO 1 rating, which gives us as residential and commercial owners reduced rates on our insurance because their rating is so high. The firefighters have endorsed me and are supporting me in my reelection.
Do you have any other endorsements?
The only other one was the Houston Association of Realtors. They endorsed me last time also. And I
Okay. Firefighters and HAR.
yes.
Okay.
Along that same line, explain how the township has police coverage now, and how would that change?
Fleet coverage for law enforcement?
Yes, and how would it change if you incorporate?
Okay, well, it will depend on which of the 3 models that the board selects, and then be it a general law or home rule, city council, that could change. But we will, at our next meeting, and the information will be presented on the 17th of October, and they are hoping that a decision will be made, be it the full force, be it the hybrid, or be it complete contractual. I know that doesn't completely answer, Larry, but we haven't made a decision on that. I do know in our recent budget, we started purchasing some of the fleet rather than have it counted. So.
Vehicles?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so.
And we right now don't own where they're housed, but have the first option, it's my understanding, to purchase that.
So
On Grogan's Mill and Lakefront.
Yeah, lakefront. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so we have the title to those vehicles?
The ones that we just purchased.
Oh, okay. Is that all of them there, or, you know?
No,
About
it's
how
my
many?
understanding. I know we just purchased, I believe Captain Hollifield. 4. I'd have to get back with you on that.
Okay.
But I do know that we did this at the last meeting.
All right.
How long have you been CEO and president of Interfaith?
I was for 12 years.
Well,
And I loved it. It's, good things are for sharing. It's the foundation of our community. With that said, I retired right after I was elected for my first term. I then took a breath, retired in April 2016, and then Dr. Rob reached out to me, and he was not seeking re-election, but asked me to be part of his ministry staff. And I was the executive director of generosity and head of school. As the executive director of generosity, I oversaw and raised $30 million for their capital campaign, oversaw the foundation and stewardship. As head of school, I was brought in to strengthen and restructure. My first year, we added 6th grade, the next year 7th grade, and my last year 8th grade. And then I retired.
so after adding all that, you want to be sure you're gone.
Well, shared with Dr. Rob, and, I like to build. But a lot of people made that happen. Interfaith was successful because it was a we, not a me. The church was successful not because of Ann, but because of somebody much higher than all of us. It was a God thing, and the school was good. It just needed, it grew so fast, we needed to take a breath. And as of June 30th, 2019, I am fully retired, and I'm spending 100% with the township.
What date was that?
It was 2 months ago.
Oh, 2
almost
months
3.
ago. Oh,
June
okay.
30th of this summer.
I got you. Okay.
Yes.
James?
Well, welcome to my class, the ones that are burdened on society now that you're retired.
My husband's retired too.
This question really comes up because you're endorsed by the firefighters. The Woodlands firefighters came to us about 10 years ago because they were wanting to become employees of township and unionize. And at the time, it was a contract. Is it still a contract service?
No, they're employees.
They're employees of the
Yeah.
township?
Yes.
So my question is this. Personally, I see the need for unions. I worked for Fortune 100 companies for over 30 years, and I was an exempt employee, but I know without a doubt, CEO and senior executives don't give a whit for the employees, basically. This changed over 2 decades before, but I see the need for unions for that reason. Is really no good way for private sector employees to get representation. When we start talking about public sector, by that I mean government employees, it's a different ball game, because you see now you have people deciding to agree to a union contract, and those people spend tax dollars. They don't really answer. It's not like a business. Their profit line is affected. Mm-hmm. They would have no reason to say no. Government does, because they can just raise taxes to pay for the increased benefits. And we saw Houston basically decimated by absurdly union negotiated retirement benefits, where police were making more money retired than they did as a full-time employee. So here's my question after all that.
Okay, no.
With the corporation, let's just say the transition, the town should probably be at first the governing body until there's an election. Do you think that the firefighters and the police that are hired should be unionized, yes or no, and why, either way?
I think it's important that people are treated fairly,
Sure.
that people are respected, be it that they pack your parachute or jump from the plane. I just have always felt that. When I was at Interfaith, there was a year that we could not give raises to our staff, and so shared with my entire team, including myself, that no one, if we could not give it to all, we were not giving it to the leadership team either.
Sounds good.
My board, my chairman of the board then said, you need to do, because otherwise it looks like perhaps that you were not doing the job that you were hired to do, and stuck real firm with that. If I could not treat my staff to the degree that I felt they should be treated, then I would not either. With that said, then going back to your question, I think if you treat, and I know that unions are in other parts of the country, I have never been, I'm a supporter of individuals, not of a collective group. At the same time, I've seen in different businesses or the need for that. But if we treat our firefighters, our law enforcement, our employees, everyone fair, and give them the salary that they deserve, I think that it's a non-issue.
All right, thank you. Another quick one on the nonprofit issue. I'm sorry, a quick one.
Okay,
Not another.
Never has a quick.
I tell people when someone is a pastor, not preacher per se, but pastor, runs a church or a nonprofit organization, I have reservation. It's a negative, but not a deciding factor. I said for this reason: nonprofit and of course pastors are accustomed to spending other people's money, and they expect people to support that spending habit. So, my question is, where tax dollars are concerned, sure, a county could give it voluntarily, but they didn't get that money from us voluntarily, okay?
Right.
We have to pay. We're required. So when do you feel that it's appropriate or inappropriate for a city to spend tax dollars to give to a nonprofit or any organization like that?
I'll take it as the township, since we are not a city
Okay,
yet.
good,
Let me
sure.
take it in that regard. The township does not have a social service department. With that said, Interfaith of the Woodlands does an amazing at transportation for disabled, for people who are transportation dependent. And we do not have bus service here. There are people who cannot afford to use Uber or Lyft.
Well,
or
so you're saying the
whatever
money
it
they
is.
receive is used for what Woodlands would otherwise have to do for themselves.
Well,
in the
if
township.
we were.
You're paying for
a
service.
city- Yes, it's a service, and it's
Are
a
there any that are
contractual-
receiving funds where that's not true? Any nonprofits? at
I'm
this
sorry?
point? You know, is the Woodlands giving funds to a nonprofit that doesn't provide a service it would ordinarily do? Are you aware of any?
Are you talking about events?
Perhaps.
Yeah, well, yes, the Woodlands Township currently does support the chamber, which, you know.
The
it's a
Chamber of
partnership.
Commerce?
Which I see that as a partnership. I'm more of, have always been about collaborative and partnerships than, you get more done and good things happen if you all work together.
What service do they provide?
They promote business. But I'm sharing, you asked what, would also there's funds that are given to the economic development.
Right.
As well as economic development, some of the events that are hosted, the CBB, which is a whole different entity in itself. then the sponsorships for the dragon boats, the Run Through the Woods, some of the other entities. What we are doing now is, we had so many requests during the last budget, is that we are going to go through and have it go through the Economic Development Committee and and that any entity wanting or seeking funds from the township, they have to go through to be sure it's driven for the economic development of the community.
Of the community.
And we're developing an application that we hope to present to the board in the fourth quarter.
What's your feeling towards building an art center?
Well, that's one of the things, I sit on the Economic Development Committee, I don't,
Right.
yes, and it's something that when we did our feasibility study, that the residents of the Woodlands felt it was a priority and wanted to do that. Right now, Chairman Bunch and I have met with the Cynthia Woods Mitchell Pavilion Board. We are in discussion of, and this has been made public so I can share, of a site perhaps over in the Gold Lot.
But
by
you
the,
expect it to be self-sustaining, I gather?
Yes, yes. I mean,
If it were
that
not,
has
would
to-
that change your decision on it?
Well, to me it would. I've always
Okay.
been very fiscally responsible. I grew up in the Midwest where you bought something, you paid cash. I mean, that's, and my husband and I have lived that way our entire married life. You buy or what you can afford and you save.
No credit cards.
Yeah, we don't, I still, I know you laugh at me, but I
Don't
cash a
smile.
check. I cash a check every week and that's what we live on. Just have always done that since I was a young child. You know, we'll remember when I worked in my dad's office, who was a physician, and people would come in and pay, you know, some people paid with a bundle of, that's not bundle, bushel. It's been too long since I've lived there. And, you know, a bushel of corn, you know.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
those days.
it just that you treat people with respect. Operated the very same way when I was at Interfaith. When I started there, I did not realize that every department was financially challenged, very much so. So the very first thing that did was that if we're going to do good things for people, we need to find some funding. And have never operated in the red. Brought, not just Ann, but my team at Interfaith, that from here to here to make it very fiscally responsible. Did the same thing at the church. I've just lived my life that way.
Thank you.
Okay,
You're welcome. Okay.
Yes.
Is it finally your turn?
you know, 4 years ago, we thought that your position with Interfaith might present a conflict of interest. Was that ever a problem? Did you ever have to recuse yourself in any issues?
No, we'll share with you, I abstain when they come and ask for money, I do, and I'm on their advisory board. We'll share with you, when I very first decided to run for the township, I knew I was leaving Interfaith. My board asked me not to share that because they did not want it to be an issue in the campaign. And so, knew in July that at that time, my last time at Interfaith was going to be the end of November after the election. Be it I was elected or not. It was time to take a breath. And so fast forward, after I was elected, my board asked if I would wait and not roll off until April, the beginning of second quarter for 2015, 2014? Yeah.
So,
So my plan was always to retire from there because I did not want to in any way jeopardize or harm the reputation of an organization that I think has made the Woodlands so different. I think it's the foundation of who we are. embraces all social economic, all faiths, all ethnicities. It's a good thing.
Was Dr. Robbins' ministry ever a beneficiary of the township?
No,
They
no,
didn't.
never.
So how many groups are there that get money from the Woodlands? Is it like 5 or 10 or 50
Of nonprofits of the Woodlands Township?
that the Woodlands contributes money to?
Okay. Interfaith, senior rights, I would say at least a half dozen.
Okay.
Yeah.
And back to the tax issue, when you were talking about the disabled exemption over 65 and homestead, what current exemptions are available right now from the Woodlands?
Well, it's disabled and 65,
But not the homestead.
and support, no. We looked at that, and Director McMullen brought that up and something, but we could not do the low tax rate according to our controller, according to the information given, and the homestead. At the same time, once we adopted the effective tax rate, several board members said that perhaps we need to go back next year and revisit that.
Okay.
Okay, so on the budget, should the Economic Development Reserve Fund, kind of similar to what
Yeah.
Dennis was getting to, should that money go for like a performing arts theater? How should that, venues like that be structured? Should the Woodlands own that 100%, or should it be in private, public partnerships like with Oxy? If they stay here and you got the
Well,
largest
that would
oil
be,
company,
yeah,
US company in the world.
yeah. We're
And
not.
ExxonMobil right here,
Yeah.
so.
We're not in the fine arts business. We don't have the talent or the expertise to run a performing arts center, and we know that.
What about the pavilion? Can
Well,
they-
that's what we are hoping that the pavilion, you need a partner. From the very beginning, when we were looking at doing a science museum or cultural arts center, performing arts center, the sentiment of the board appeared, I can't speak for all the board members, but appeared that we did not have the expertise to be the operator at all. Second, being prudent with taxpayers' money, that we could not use all tax revenue to support it. We needed to find outside sources, be it corporate, be it individual, as well as a strong operating partner if we were going to move forward. The Cynthia Woods Mitchell Pavilion appear to be very interested, and they would make a wonderful operating partner. With that said, the question, it's all about negotiations, so I can't say too much more, but,
How much would that cost, a
well,
building like
we're
that?
talking $80 million. It's expensive. It's
How much of
expensive.
that do you think partners would be willing to help underwrite, like
Well, I would-
ExxonMobil?
Well, I can't speak for Exxon or
Well, I mean,
others, but.
percent wise,
Yeah.
are we
Well,
talking?
we would hope, if we went into that, you always go in and do a capital campaign, and, no, you do, go out, similar to what we did, when I worked at the church. Before we built, we had what we hoped to build, but we can't build it until you have the money. And so if this is 80 million, if we go through and need to raise 30 million, 40 million, whatever the magic number is, then your first charge in any capital campaign that I've been involved in, but again, this is not a one-person decision, it would be a board decision as to the amount of funds, but have never during my charge of fundraising, be it at Interfaith, be it at the church, be it at any nonprofit board that I've sat on, have never spent, unless the money's raised and committed, have never spent it. If you only raise X, then you only build Y, or build X.
You did pretty good at that. You raised what, 30 million?
Somebody bigger than Ann did. God helped me on that immensely, and all the people at the church.
30 million to the church?
30 million.
Okay.
Mhm. And 2.5 months,
Wow.
And what, to,
2.5 months.
wow.
But with that said, we did a lot of things, pre-planning, and you give where your heart is, and we're a very strong, our community is a very strong faith-based community. It takes a lot of people to give.
How long ago was that?
We finished it a year ago.
Okay, thank you.
I retired in June, so it would have been the year prior to that, yeah.
Wow. James?
I know he's gonna take more time than he's allowed, so I'll go ahead and let him have my time.
We've got about 10 minutes.
Okay. Well, I guess as you're on the township, you've provided a lot of information that the other candidates we had to pull out in a slower process. We can ask you some questions we couldn't get to with the others. For incorporation, of course, the city, as a city, the Woodlands would, well, let me preface that with the road issue that we all know is out there. And that's the fact that Precinct 2 Commissioner is hell-bent on putting an FM 1960 type road through the Woodlands. And this, he lied during the election saying he never do it, yet he's doing it. At the same time, road funding from the state and federal has to go through the Houston-Galveston Area Council. And this last time, none of the Woodlands projects were funded, I mean zero, which amounts to about $7 million. And the county as a whole got a lower percentage of projects approved as opposed to requested than any other county in that same area. So do you feel that you're getting or can somehow get adequate representation for the Woodlands as a unincorporated area? Or not, is that a driving factor in your mind to incorporate both the road funds and preventing the Woodlands being split by some monstrosity like FM 1960?
Yeah, no, and do not want that to happen at all. We've lived here a long, long time. Was never in favor of that. We'll share with you right now, we can attend meetings, but we have no authority.
Vote,
we
or,
have
yeah.
no vote. I very strongly believe it's important to have representation that allows you to vote. And that, as a city, it's my understanding that we would be a voting member of HGAC. I do know when I was at Interfaith, we worked with HGAC, with the Workforce Division. We had 13 offices in 7 counties.
Yeah.
HGAC is a very intricate organization. At the same time, they have the mechanism to fund and to make, be it roads, be it other things happen in the greater Houston area. So it's important.
Now, also as incorporation, of course, for the first time, you'll actually be able to have zoning and be able to enforce it. Now, we know that the Woodlands is landlocked. There's not going to be any additional growth territorial-wise. So I guarantee you, coming up in the future, maybe not so distant, you're going to have some business wanting to come in and build some complex or something, and oh my gosh, the only land left, we need to take some homes. And we're back to the old eminent domain problem, where the city, you have different entities, in Texas even, where they've taken private property by condemnation, eminent domain, not for a road or anything, but to
for-
turn it over to a business
To a
to then
developer.
develop.
Yeah.
What is your position on the city doing
I'm not in
that?
favor of that.
So would you
Yeah.
try to pass some ordinance prohibiting the
Yes,
use of eminent domain
yeah,
for
that
private
was-
enterprises?
Yeah, that, well, not private enterprises, but there's two, there's one, HAR, because I support that. I'm gonna take a minute.
The Association of Realtors?
Yes, that was one. The public use is for parks and roads, but the
Right.
public purpose is that you sell the eminent domain, you sell it, and then they turn around and sell it to a developer that builds a big building. I'm not, it should be applied sparingly, and to me, I would not support that.
So in those terms, for public use but not for public purpose.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, let's move on.
all right. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Well, you've listed here a handful of groups that you give time or money to, and these are groups
Yeah.
that we agree with. So are there some groups that we don't agree with? Antifa, Rainbow Coalition, Occupy, Black Lives Matter.
Wait a minute.
Can you think of some other folks that we might think are controversial that you've given money to? I'm
What?
looking at where you give your money to civic, political, or union organizations.
Yeah, well, I don't give it to any union, I give it to like Interfaith, Montgomery County Food Bank, my church, CISD Foundation, I think I gave it to the Rotary Club.
How about ones like I listed, Rainbow Coalition, Occupy, Antifa, Black Lives Matter?
I don't know what those are,
Oh,
I'm
I
sorry.
guess that's good.
I'm sorry.
Well, during the vote,
They don't seem to come around here for some reason.
You know.
well,
Too
actually,
many.
they do.
Yeah.
Well, we did have the
Right.
Gay
Well,
Pride Parade here.
I'm sorry?
The Gay Pride Parade?
That is at the township, and we approved that. We did not give money, but we did, we approved it. They went through, followed the application process,
That's
sort
fine.
of.
Wasn't there a vote to waive the fees?
There was, but
They
it did
asked for
not
that.
pass.
Okay, they
Yes.
asked for that. How was your votes on
Well,
that?
did not. One of the directors made the motion to, I think it was 4,200 or 49, I can't remember. And I seconded it because you should allow for discussion, and, but it failed 6-1. And I was part of the 6.
Well, do you always have to allow for discussion? I mean, if there's not interest there and it dies without a second, then,
Yeah, well, I no, realize that,
yeah.
but the individual who, he was told to bring it back by one of the board members and present again. And so it's only being I believe in being respectful.
Well, what kind of groups get that fee waived for them?
I don't know, but we did not
You've seen
waive,
some that have?
I'm
You've
sorry?
seen some groups that had that fee waived?
For Ironman, there's some type of, I mean, there's a few that we do, I think in Ironman and 2 others would have to go through and look, that bring, be it heads and beds, bring in more revenue.
Sure.
That offsets our property tax, we'll share with you.
Yeah,
Sales and hotel make up 50%, so that our property tax is only 36% of our entire budget.
right.
It's a good thing to, even though it's an inconvenience for a lot of us, we just stay home, or go, or walk. So, but it's being respectful, and I think that's important.
So we got about 4 minutes. Anybody got a pressing? Wait,
Fine.
we have had one. Any idea, well, I know we covered the exemptions, homestead, we did over 65
Mhm.
disabled. I know
Yes.
McMullen brought up the homestead.
Yes,
And it looks like all this is incorporation talk, and the effective tax rate kind of forced an issue that I think is very good. What do you think about zero-based budgeting?
Well, we need to do it.
Yeah,
We should have, again, take full responsibility because I sit on the board. We should have done it this year, but we didn't. But believe our chairman, as well as several others of us, said that we need to do that next year. And I think, I don't know, but it appears that perhaps we might start the budget process earlier so that we can look at that. I think that it's important also to have it staff input. I would ask the staff to look at places that perhaps they would suggest that we can reduce expenses. If you hire good people, they should know it better than a governing board who is there and isn't actually doing the work. At the same time, a governing board has the final say and oversees, does not micromanage.
is there a search on for Dr. Norrell or Mr. Norrell?
Yes, I put it on the agenda, on the September agenda, and our HR will go through and conduct. Gordy, our chairman, also Director Brown and Director Razor will be helper with that, and hopefully the board, when elected, will decide on a search firm.
What does that job pay?
I'm sorry?
What does that job pay?
160,
Less than the
Less than
commissioners,
Charlie.
for sure, yeah.
yeah.
Okay. And you've attended all the special planning meetings?
I have originally Chairman Bunch, Director McMullen, and myself were on the task force, and then John, due to his commute downtown, could not always make it, and so Director Reeser, Chairman Bunch, and I.
So how far along do you think we are, and I think I asked you that before, but
Yeah.
on percent-wise, say, everything's supposed to be done by what, end of this
January.
year?
Yes.
January, and what percent are we to
We're
that
pretty
point?
close. The law enforcement is a big chunk.
Yeah.
And that will be in October. If a decision can be made, then they hope to come back in December or January with a calculated number.
So are we 50% of the way there?
I'd say closer
60,
to 75, 80.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. October, by the end of October, I shouldn't be so quick, it's not October yet. By the end of October, law enforcement is the big
3 days.
piece. You know, safety and law enforcement are very important. They're,
Yeah, especially as Houston moves out in this
oh,
direction.
I know, it's frightening, and we've always had enhanced law enforcement, also incredible fire department, and we need to continue. I ride my bike at 5:30, 6 every morning, and I feel,
Good for you.
thank you.
Don't look for Dennis anywhere on those bikeways.
Yeah, but I feel safe, I mean, that I can go and.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's the point, it's not so much,
That's the reason why we
but
go.
feel safe, never, you know, with my children, of course, when they were older, not when they're young, but you want to feel safe, to walk to your car or not worry. And that has always, as I shared earlier, that's always been my number one priority as a township director.
Okay, good deal. Well, thank you
Yeah.
again for coming in.
Well,
Well,
you're welcome.
if you'd like to, right now, we've got 5 minutes, so if you'd like to take up to that time to close out, and you certainly have
Oh,
that time to do it.
Okay, let me give you this. This is, if we can pass it, there we go. And 1, 2, 3,
Thank you.
We'll share.
just in case.
All right.
One is, would appreciate your, thank you, Larry, consideration. I think I've done a good job on the board in representing the people. I think I have a broad perspective from all age groups, all ethnicities, all social economic groups, as well as representing our community, and have done a good job. I take great pride in that. One thing you'll always know is I say what I mean. So,
That's good.
And mean what you say.
and mean what I say. Thank you.
So how, we,
Okay.
yeah.